How do you troubleshoot that situation? Well, you've got to go back. You got to go back to the basics, and I think it doesn't make any difference whether you're a professional logger or arborist or whether you're cutting firewood. You've got to have somewhat of a understanding of how the basics work, like we've talked about before, and just thinking through here. And I don't know if he was that accurate on his information here, but he says he uses it almost every day. So I don't know if he's cutting firewood or he's running it in the woods, what the deal is, or if he's a tree guy, I don't know. But more or less, he says he's got 11 months and now it needs to be rebuilt. Well, how much time can you put on that saw in a day? And this is something I worked with a lot of the mills. The first program I put together with the RDT system, reduced downtime, was with Weyerhaeuser up in Klamath Falls, Oregon. And they had a unique sharpening system that they worked with. And then I think it was Clint there in the shop. He had a system that he went through checking out the saws for the guys and then dressing bars and chain and making sure all that was ready to go. And that was the first place I really started watching the actual operation of the saws throughout the day, and just to see how much time went on them. How much time, Warren, do you think goes on a saw in a full working day?
My gut says probably close to 6 hours.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the testing, we started to kind of keep up with it by number of tankfuls, because most all saws are about 30 to 40 minutes as far as run time on a tank of fuel. So we started talking to the guys we put out saws for test is keep up with the number of tanks, and we pretty much knew. Now, this 562 XP, you could plug it into your computer and you could find out exactly how many hours it's got on it in those 11 months. So now it's kind of technical to be able to do that. But for sure, we checked. I stopwatched quite a lot, and guys were saying, "Oh yeah, I run that thing 10 or 12 hours a day." And they did work out there in the woods 10 or 12 hours a day. But when you really looked at what the time was it went on the saw, it was about 5 hours. And so though you start to think about, you got 5 hours and you got a 5-day work week. What's that? 40? That's 25. Is that right?
25 hours.
And then you're the computer guy. So if you got 25 hours a week that you're putting on the saw, and let's just look at it at the max, you got 4 weeks in a month. So what's that? That's 100. So you got 11 months of that. So how much is that?
1,100.
1,100 hours. So let's think about now, if you had a car or a truck, and most people start thinking about, well, I get up to 100,000 miles. I'm either going to do one of two things. I'm going to go trade it because it's getting up some mileage, or either I'm going to run it to 400,000, right? So at that point, if you're going to run it to 400,000, you've got to think about, probably that guy has got several oil changes in that picture. You've got air filters, you've got all this kinds of stuff. And so you start to think about, let's take that 100,000 miles, and you think about, let's say we were able to do 60 miles an hour the whole time. So how many hours would that be?
So 100,000 divided by 6, 1,667, basically.
1,600. So not a whole lot of difference. You've put 100,000 miles on that vehicle, and now you've put 1,100 hours on that saw in that 11 months, right? And you're probably not going to do 100,000 miles in 11 months on your vehicle. But now let's look at this. What if you had a gas engine or a diesel engine in your truck or car? What's the RPM usually max, unless you got somebody with a lead foot? Probably what, 2,500, something like that, maybe 3,000 average.
Yeah, diesel lower, but yeah, gas probably around there.
So let's say with a diesel or the newer gases with those 10-speed transmissions and all that stuff, you're probably looking at 1,500 to 2,000 RPM running those 100,000 miles. So now let's look at that 562. What does it turn? 13,600. So that's 2 to 3 times the amount of engine revolutions than you'd have on that truck with 100,000 miles. And then I ask people, I say, well, let me ask you this: how many tanks of fuel have you done? Oh, I don't know, man. I went through a lot. You've got also the mixing, and you've got gas and how good it is and all this kind of stuff. Or maybe they use canned gas, whatever, but you've got hopefully good fuel going into it, but that's not always the case. Then you start to look at, how do you transport it? Is it open to moisture and humidity? Because that gas, no matter what kind you got, starts to attract moisture. So if you're just letting it ride around the back of your truck, that's one thing too. And then the next thing is that it doesn't take but just a couple of minutes during a hard rainstorm to mess up a fuel system very quickly. And then I would ask, next thing is, how many air filters have you replaced? How often do you clean the air filter? Those are all things. And I find most of the time, a saw that's been going on for, say, 2 to 3 years. A person has taken pretty good, consistent care of fuel. They blow out the filter, maybe clean out around the airflow and stuff a good bit, once a week at least, something like that. And so you got a pretty decent maintenance going on, and you start to think through it though. Still, how long can that filter go without replacement? Yeah, you can tap it out, you can blow it out a little bit, but then at some point in time, according to the type of filter that's on that particular saw, you got to replace it. But how many are replaced after 2 or 3 years?
Not a lot.
I find very few.